welcome to the LifePro podcast, where today I have the pleasure of having Emily Todd, who is a personal freedom and business coach. Today's topic is analysis paralysis, which I'm a victim of so many times every day of my life. So I'm excited to combat this paralysis. Before we get into our topic today, Emily, how are you?
I am so excited to be here. So excited. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, why don't you start out and tell us a little bit about your journey? I know you've had exceptional last few years, but tell us about your whole life.
The last 2 years have definitely been the best. It's been me aligning with what I really desire to do in life, coach and support women to, ultimately follow their dreams. But before that, I spent almost 15 years in the hustle and grind world of tech and startups and clawed my way up that ladder very successfully. I was really good at climbing the ladder. I was, in retrospect, I didn't consciously know this at the time, but attempting to receive my dad's love and make him proud. Like, look, Dad, look how many people I'm managing. Look at my bank account. Look at my title and all those things. And long story short, I was at a startup for about 4 years and had a lot of success there and became a director managing a 20-person team by age, I think it was 31. So I felt like, wow, I've kind of reached the top of the proverbial mountain in many ways. Like, this is it. This is what happiness is. Whoa. And felt very quickly that the view up there was not all it was cracked up to be. And just had this feeling of, is this all there is? And in tandem with that, I had called my dad, right? I'm like, Dad, I got this promotion. And she's so proud. Aren't I the best daughter? And he replied, that's so great, Emily. I'm so proud of you. And that was it.
Yeah.
And I was, I think, expecting some effusive
Yeah.
confirmation of my worthiness as a daughter, as a human. And at that moment, that's when it started to unravel what I had been spending my life doing, just hustling, proving, pleasing. And did not know this was about to happen, but resigned from my job, from my tech startup, went into consulting. And I was so excited because I'm like, I'm going to have time freedom. I'm going to go work from Bali. It's going to be amazing. And then COVID hit about 2 weeks later. So that really threw a wrench in my plans. And I ended up quarantining at my parents' house in the very glamorous New Jersey instead of going to Bali.
Right.
And like many humans, I had a lot of time on my hands during quarantine and was feeling like, okay, consulting is cool, but it's not quite it. And had, multiple dark nights of the soul and existential crises in quarantine, like we all did. And I was like, what do I really desire to do? And this is a true story. It's pretty cool. I found a notebook in my parents' house in the basement during quarantine from when I was like 21 years old, like a baby. And in the notebook, there was like this bucket list of what I wanted to do with my life. And on it, I wrote, I want to be a coach. And I looked at that. I'm like, it's so funny. What did 21-year-old Emily know about anything? But I think I had seen like an OG, like Gabby Bernstein. And I was like, whatever she's doing, she's a coach. I want to do that. But then, of course, I forgot about that desire. I forgot about that dream. It was time to be serious and climb the ladder and make everyone proud. So very quickly after that, I signed up for my coaching certification program, and the rest is history. Here we are.
It's great. And I'm sure that you spend a lot of time coaching people through analysis paralysis. So let's talk about that. How do you define analysis paralysis?
Analysis paralysis is, first of all, something I used to be very entrenched in because I was in a world, right, that was very analytical and where being very mind driven was very rewarded. So I'm very familiar with it. And I would define it as just an inability to make decisions because you're taking in too much input. You're taking in too much data. You're taking in too many other people's opinions, and you're weighing the pros and cons and your worst case scenarioing. And like you end up thought looping, just spinning around, overwhelmed with all of the data you're taking in, and therefore unable to move and unable to make a decision.
Right.
And I think this is such a blocker, right? Especially as an entrepreneur, because you've got to make decisions and move quickly. So for me, I experienced a lot of analysis paralysis when I first launched my business a little over 3 years ago. I was like, should I do this? Should I do that?
Yeah.
And I was crowdsourcing opinions, right? I'm like, what do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? What do you think? And everyone had a different opinion, of course. So it leads to this total lack of self-trust, I think, as well, because you're constantly looking outside of yourself for the decision to be made
Yeah.
by, pulling in all this data. But again, like, that's rewarded, like in the 9 to 5 world and a lot of our culture. It's like, you be responsible, weigh all the options, do the pros and cons list, like read every Google article, or, and it, of course, the abundance of information we have is so beautiful, right, in this day and age. But I see analysis paralysis, I think, probably more prevalent in so many because of that abundance of information
More
and just
more,
wanting,
more choices, right?
yeah,
More information to evaluate. And analysis paralysis can affect us, whether it's what we're deciding what to have for breakfast. We talked about your breakfast today, or it could be something like a major life decision, right? What
yeah,
you moved from New York to Mexico City. Like that's a big decision, right?
yeah,
Um, but ultimately you use the information you had to make the best decision that you can, right?
yes.
You find that maybe some people, whether it's lunch or moving or a career change or even a relationship, self-confidence plays a big role in like making these decisions. Like how much does that factor in?
I think hugely. I think it's self-trust more than confidence. I think it's trusting yourself to have your own back and to make decisions that are in alignment with what you desire to experience and create in life.
Yeah,
And I think you build self-trust and that ability to trust, like, your instincts, and you're like, okay, I think this is the decision that should be made. And you build that ability to trust that voice and that knowing over time.
yeah,
It's like something you practice, right? Like we mentioned breakfast here. So I always say, like, when you're really like locked in the quicksand of analysis paralysis, one of, I think, the most powerful ways you can start attacking it is forcing yourself to make these small decisions quickly, right? Like the breakfast, or, my sister, we talk about this a lot. Like growing up, she was very locked in analysis paralysis. Like, what should I, like, 40 minutes, like deciding what to eat, or like we're at the store and she's 30 minutes deciding what mascara to buy. And it's like those like small moments, I think we can start to build the muscle and train ourselves and like, let's make a decision now. Because then when the bigger moments come along,
yeah,
right, we'll be a little more versed. And I think it just comes down to, as well, like, right, we have this voice in our head, right, that's like never stopping. It's always chattering. It's always like this and this, and you worrying about this. And I read something recently about neuroscience says we have something like 60,000 thoughts a day, and like 80% of them are limiting.
yeah,
They're anxiety driven, worry driven, regret, future tripping, obsessing over the past. And so it's like one of those things, if we listen to the voice in our head, those 60,000 thoughts a day, like, of course we're going to be completely overwhelmed, right? So to me, a big part of it too is starting to create spaciousness around that voice that's always chattering, always running.
but I think that happens a lot, right? We put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and there's stress and there's fog to a point where we can't have the clarity to make the right decisions. So
Yeah.
my question to you is, I mean, what advice do you give to your clients or people out there, how to get themselves in the right state of mind to make decisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have a few things I want to say on this one. So I think starting to get out of analysis paralysis, a big part of it is getting really clear on your goals and your values and your desires, because that gets to be the lens that we make decisions through, like in each domain of our lives. Like whether it is, we're talking about food analysis paralysis because we're hungry, right? But
Yep.
like getting really
Lunchtime.
clear on what that looks like for you. What are your values and goals when it comes to your body and nutrition? Like that informs the decision you make. And that, like, when you're really clear on what the desired outcome is, then that's the lens, right? Or getting really clear on like your values in business or in relationship, and or in how you want to, spend your vacation. I know that's something a lot of people get into analysis paralysis about too. Like, where should I go? Or in entrepreneurship, right? There's so many opportunities for analysis paralysis. So I think there too, the opportunity as well is get really clear. What is important to you? What is your goal? What is your desire? So then when you're presented with this like influx of information, you're able to make a decision with that lens.
Yeah.
And this is a huge one for me that I've been dropping into very deeply the past year, is the body, using the body to make decisions, because the body has so much wisdom that the mind could never have. And they say our intuition, right, lives in the body. So it's like, I start to do this dropping in when I know, because I still notice myself at times getting like, what should I do? Oh no, like ping ponging back and forth in my brain. So I listen to my body. I'm like, how does this feel? Does this feel powerful? Or does this feel like my body's collapsing? Does this feel like an energizing decision? Or can I feel it right now, like draining my energy? Will this feel good to have done? And listening to that, like using that as a sense of, as a source of input when making a decision. And honestly, that has really helped simplify things for me, because we can spiral around in our minds and forever. Right. So to me, that's been like the final gatekeeper in a decision. I'll like, how does this feel? I'll just close my eyes for a few seconds, think it through, like imagine doing that thing. Does it feel powerful? Do I expand or do I collapse? So that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah.
And then I think another thing that has been really supportive is watching my language around how I describe things, because we are linguistic beings, right? And so I noticed when I would say, this is a really big decision, this is really important, everything is hinging on this, then I would create so much anxiety that would then only fuel the analysis paralysis. So I've been watching, and I support my clients to do this as well. Like, how can we reframe that, right? Like if it's like, there's a big money, conversation in your business. It's like, oh my God, this is so important. Or can we look at it as, wow, this is a bigger number than I've been experiencing before. Like, this is exciting. Wow. Like and shift your language. And when we shift our language and the narrative, that tends to also impact the experience and decrease the anxiety that really, fuels analysis paralysis. And then the other thing I would love to say, and I know, I'm an advocate for this, but is just to really start embracing that courageous, messy, imperfect action, and knowing that we often cannot think ourselves to clarity. It often comes with taking action, small action, even like just to start getting feedback of like, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? To start to test the waters and create clarity that way, versus I'm not going to make any decision or take any action until I have the complete roadmap laid out, or I have every aspect of this decision at hand, played out. So I think that's huge. Like, action creates clarity. That's one of the pillars of my coaching. And so I work with a lot of women who are launching their businesses and coming from corporate and very in analysis paralysis. And they're used to, well, we don't act, right? That's what we're taught. We don't take action until we have the plan approved by our CEO. So they're like waiting for the plan to be all laid out before they move. And I'm like, we're going to get clarity as we start moving. Clarity emerges through movement. I'm a big believer in that.
Well, I mean, I have a few things to say to that. I've recently had to make a business decision, and it's taking me 3 months, or it shouldn't take me 3 months. And similar to how you work with your clients at my business, my business coach also told me that, he's told me, hey, you're making this a bigger decision than it is, right? And that really stuck with me. And it's like, she's right. Like, it's really not that big of a decision. And it's the language that I use behind the decision. And I gave her all these excuses why I didn't make the decision. And she, called me out on it, obviously, to a point where it made me realize that, hey, I just need to move forward. I need to take action. So, and
I love your coach.
Yeah. I mean, some of it, sometimes when it comes to business, like, we let emotions kind of get in the way of our decisions. And like you said, we're not listening to our gut. We're not listening to our body. And we get strung up on these different conflicts and make something out of nothing. So
yeah. I mean, that's what we're hardwired to do as humans. Like, that's our biology. We're hardwired to look for problems and to constantly be risk assessing. That's our reptilian brain. Like, it's trying to protect us, and it's gotten us from cavemen, surviving and hunting in the
Yeah.
bushes, like looking for danger, to where we are as a species now. And it's been very valuable, but it's not as valuable, right, when you're operating in a world that actually is quite safe.
Yeah.
And so our tendency to catastrophize and worst case scenario and this is a big deal is not particularly useful. And so I love what your coach said as well. Yeah, like let's stop making a mountain out of a
Oh, that's
molehill, as
exactly
they
what it is.
say.
And so further to that point, I mean, something like lunch shouldn't take us 40 minutes to decide, right? But
Yeah.
maybe a major business decision should take 4 months to decide. How do we, I mean, do you have advice for people on what's the appropriate amount of analysis before it becomes paralysis?
I love that question so much. I think, yes, I think we need to recognize there are certain decisions that get to take a longer period of time. I would challenge you on 4 months of being
In
the
some,
nest. Yeah, the
like
nest, but maybe.
last year I closed down one of my businesses, and it was a business I was working on for 10 years. It took me,
Wow.
it probably took me a few years to get to that point to like decide, but it really, you know, and I was like you managing a lot of different people. So it meant like having to let go, fire all these people that are like,
Mm,
and it's not like, let's say we had 50 employees. It's not just 50 employees. It's 50 employees plus their families. So we had a
oh,
lot of people that we're feeding, right?
yeah.
Luckily at the time, like a lot of them were able to get back on their feet, but it was not only a business decision, it was also an emotional decision
Oh
because the
gosh.
numbers told us the story, right? The number told you, okay, it's no doubt, that's it, time's done, time to move on. But it was hard, right? Because
Yeah.
it's your ego, and obviously something you work really hard and big part of your life to have to kind of move on. Just similar to you, like you work your way up the ladder, you work so hard to get to the top, you achieved your goal, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't for you anymore. Like now
Hmm.
is time to make that big decision and to kind of move on from that. So I think people don't make these big major decisions because of the fear of failure, right? It's like, when
Yeah.
it comes to entrepreneurship, I think what 9 out of 10 businesses fail in the first 6 months or so. Um,
Oh, that's a sobering one.
so
I
imagine,
think I remember that from when I was thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, and
yeah,
that's such a famous one. I had forgotten the exact percentage, but that was one of those things that really prevented me from wanting to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's like, well, I mean, either people lose their motivation because starting a new business is challenging. You know that, like starting a base of, it's not like you start coaching and have all these clients. It takes time
No, even
to
though
build.
that's how it's portrayed online. I I could rant about that forever because yeah, I mean, launching your own business is really, really challenging.
Challenging.
I think we talked about this. It's shadow work, it's existential crises, it's
Yeah,
overwhelm with all the, different
yeah,
pathways you can go down because it's no longer like your CEO or your boss telling you this is what's happening. It's like you're calling all the shots and it's so overwhelming. And it really makes you question yourself. I think something that I've seen to be true is I think a lot of us fall in love with the idea of entrepreneurship, the idea of being at the top of the mountain and having the time freedom and the income and whatever it is that we're fantasizing and about. And that is portrayed online and
yeah,
about as entrepreneurship. That's what it is. I mean, that's what I thought it was when I got started. But I think it's like we get to fall in love with the climb
yeah,
towards who we become as we're climbing towards that goal. And so for me that was like a huge shift of, instead of being
yeah,
like I'm idolizing getting on the top of the mountain, it's like falling in love with the climb and all the human I'm becoming
yeah.
as I climb, and all the pieces of me being revealed and falling away and all my shadows coming up to be looked at. Like that's entrepreneurship. Getting over my analysis paralysis, to bring it back to our topic.
Yeah, I think it's information, right? Like I think even when it comes to these businesses, like having the proper information is key. And that's really what it comes down to is once you have the right amount of information, make the decision. and
Yeah.
live with the consequences, right? If it's a
Exactly.
mistake, it was a mistake. But you and I talked about Ralph Steadman's quote, and you brought it up. There's no such thing as a mistake, really. It's just an opportunity to do something else. So talk about that. I mean, I know you're a big proponent of that. Like, there's no
Oh,
such thing, especially if you're listening to your gut, you're making a decision, educated choice based on what feels right. How do you interpret that quote?
oh, it's one of my, I actually didn't know he was the man that said that. It was something
I,
they taught us in our certification program when I was being
I had to look it up. I didn't know.
okay. And I love that my coaching program did not credit him as the originator of the quote. So thank you for illuminating that today. But that's one of my life mottos is there are no mistakes, right? There's no such thing as failure. It's only feedback. It's only learning. It's only growing. It's only tweaking, testing, polishing. It's only redirection. It's only reiterating. And I think when we are so afraid of the mistakes, we are avoiding the lessons. And you again, like this comes back to like the mind, like you can't necessarily, you can in a lot of ways, but truly learning something, truly embodying it, I think it's something you have to do on your own. And you can't, watch someone on Instagram do and learn like from their mistakes. It's like, I think a lot of it is like messing around, getting messy. How messy can you get your hands
Yeah.
and learn those lessons and training yourself and building your gifts or your messaging or your magic, whatever it is, like as you get messy and as you quote unquote fuck it up, because I really don't believe that it's actually possible. Because I always say this, when you look back, right, all the times you thought it was the most grievous error you could have made, so often we're like, I see now, I see why it had to happen in that way. It was painful, it sucked, I got hurt, other people got hurt, it was embarrassing, like whatever it is, but I get it now. And I wouldn't have that knowing had I not, again, quote unquote, made that mistake.
Yeah.
I just, I love when I make a quote unquote mistake, because then it's hardwired into my body and my mind, that knowledge.
Yeah.
And
I think too often people dwell over their mistakes and they let it linger. And I've learned through the years, right? Especially running a business. It's like you make these decisions, you live with the consequences. You made an educated decision, didn't work out for you, move on. You learn from it, right? And then you won't make
yeah,
this decision again. And in a
yeah,
way, we kind of believe in like some of it is luck, right? Sometimes our decisions require luck because there's things that are not under our control, and we kind of maybe trust in our destiny. You and I talked about one of our favorite movies by chance is Sliding Doors, and this topic really brought us to that. The without really getting into the whole movie. Gwyneth Paltrow's character, I forget her name.
oh no, what was it?
What was her name?
How are we both forgetting it? This is crazy.
Well, the point is she misses the train in one sequence, and it's basically two movies in one, and it's showing her life if she misses the train versus not misses the train, and something really small like being a few seconds late to a train changed the trajectory of her life. And when you think about it, like that probably happens to us on a daily basis, right? Like you hear about people missing planes that crash and
Oh,
or being split seconds away from a fatal car crash. And these things happen all the time and we don't think about it, right? Like running into the right person the right time could change our lives. um, and that plays a role in our decision making too, right? Like being at the right place. So how much of that is just fate in your opinion, like making these decisions? How much does that affect us?
Oh, I love it. You're asking this. I am of the belief there is a greater plan beyond what my conscious human mind is able to see and
Right.
able to, because Emily only has this very narrow perception of the grand cosmic dance that is life. And so my conscious mind, my ego is always judging, this is right, this is wrong, this should have happened, this shouldn't have happened. this person's wrong, this person's right, you're good, you're bad, that, all these judgments, right? But I don't have enough information to actually understand why certain things happen the way they do.
Yeah.
So I'm, again, like looping it back, like I'm a believer that's where our intuition comes into play. So we can be drawn to the places and people and situations that we are meant to come into contact with.
Yeah.
And so like when we're in this dance of life, in this chaos, it's like, to me, the order is brought when we like join the dance,
right,
by listening to that little voice that we all have, but that we've been conditioned in this society that prizes the mind and logic only, and it has to be a logical decision. So many of us have shut it down and we don't listen. And I think when we can start tapping into that, that is when people start to speak about things like synchronicities and miracles happening. And it does seem like magic, right? But it's, I think, this existence is magic, right? It's crazy when we really examine the nature of life, and that we're all here on this fiery ball of, hurling through space and time. It gets wild.
Yeah.
And so I believe we do have access to dropping into like starting to follow these little breadcrumbs and these little, I call them like little love notes from the universe. Like, ooh, like that, let me follow that. Because it's like, I don't know enough. Who am I to say that was what was meant to happen or wasn't meant to happen?
right.
I witnessed my mind constantly judging things and constantly saying that was wrong. This shouldn't have happened to me. My power shouldn't have gone out on Monday. But like I was saying earlier, my power went out in my building. I was annoyed. My ego was, this is wrong. This really messed up my day. I have to reschedule these calls. And then I ended up having this truly magical experience of falling asleep with candles on, watching the most majestic thunderstorm, lightning storm unfold over Mexico City. And I felt so in my body, and I had little goosebumps running up and down my body. It was just pure magic. And, but my mind was like, this is wrong. I'm behind on the work week now because my Wi-Fi was out, And you said something earlier too about mistakes. And something that's coming up for me there is, we can then be like, oh, I made this mistake. I'm so this, I'm so that, regret, anxiety. But it's like, it truly is, I think, every time you make something that feels like the wrong turn,
Yeah.
like challenge yourself to rewrite the narrative. Like, what did I learn here? How did I grow here? Why did this happen?
Yeah.
Because the narrative we ascribe to an experience impacts the experience. So if we believe this was a terrible mistake, this is the end of the world, that will be our experience. Yeah. But if we can train ourselves, so when the shit hits the fan in life, to look for the lesson, look for the gold, look for the gift, like that, I think we start to become pretty like, you can't mess with me. Yeah. When you can start alchemizing that.
Yeah. Imagine we just take the word mistake out of our vocabulary. Like,
yes.
Imagine that, how much that will shift our mindset and be able to like look to the positive, right? Like, we talked about intuition and positive manifestation, and a little bit about that, but literally, I've done over 30 podcasts, and I would say at least half of my podcasts, we've talked about intuition. Like, that's the answer to a lot of life's questions, right? Just listen to your intuition.
And I am coming from a very analytical, mind-driven background, and my dad is extremely logical and rational, like to a fault. And I was brought up feeling like that word intuition was for the woo-woo people, and it was for the people that like run around and like the hippies and they're doing like psychedelics. And it's just, I thought it was bullshit, and I thought it wasn't real. But I think so many of us now that come from a more traditional mind-driven background are starting to experience the magic of intuition and that universal guidance that is actually always there. But it's like anything. If you ignore it for long enough, the voice gets quieter and quieter. And a big part of my journey since I became an entrepreneur has been rebuilding that relationship with my intuition, because I actively shut it down, actually, like very aggressively, especially in the last few years of my 9 to 5, because I had this intuitive voice saying there's something else, you're not meant to be doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
And it
like I
did.
said earlier, is this all there
And,
is? And I didn't want to listen to it.
yeah,
So I was
because
like,
our mind tells us it doesn't make sense.
yes, it didn't make
So
sense.
if it
I
doesn't
had,
make sense, then how do we compute that? It's
yeah,
hard.
yeah, it didn't make sense. I had everything laid out for me. I had it all in the bag, like buttoned up. Like it was exactly what I'd worked my whole life for. But that voice wouldn't go away, and then I would try and numb it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of, with this phenomenon of numbing, right? We, as a culture, whether it's TV or scrolling or drinking or shopping or whatever it is, I'm actually of the belief a lot of that is avoiding and numbing that voice, and because it's conflicting with the mind's idea of how life should be and what's unfolding. And
Yeah.
yeah, like I used to use, that it's martini o'clock, let's go have a martini, and like numb that voice out because that's inconvenient. This voice, it does not fit in with my plan, does not fit in with me checking all the boxes and making daddy proud and making everyone, on LinkedIn go, wow, look at Emily go. Like my ego was like, no, you want to go back to ground zero and start a whole new career and give up everything?
Everything.
Why would you do that? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I mean, I'm 45 years old and I'm basically starting a new career. And a lot of my friends are like, how? I mean, they're very supportive and they're very happy that I was able, but they just can't understand how could somebody rebuild it, advanced age at 45.
Oh, shut up.
No, but
No.
when it comes to career, that I mean, I'm not old, but when it comes to career, that's like
Yeah.
start over. Like, a lot of us have put in a lot of, you put a lot of work into building what you did, right? And you feel like, and there's a poker term, uh, pocket vested, or like, you've put in so much into the pot,
Yeah.
that you're invested so much in the pot that you can't leave. Like you put in too much, right?
Yeah. What is it?
Um,
Or like the sunk cost, or I can't remember. There's some
yeah,
other phrase I'm
yeah,
thinking of too.
yeah.
Yeah, you've put too much
It's pot
in.
committed. Sorry, pot committed is the word in poker. Where like you put so much money in, and then now like obviously the odds have a lot to play in poker. I think poker resembles life a lot, but that's a different topic for another show. You have when it comes to like just listening to your intuition and playing your number like based on the information you have, like make a
Yeah.
decision. That's really what it comes down to. And if you make quote unquote a mistake, you learn from it. There's something positive will come from it.
Yeah, I love what you just said there, because it's like it's acting on the information you have now, the knowing you have now,
Right.
and then understanding the action you take can only create further clarity for you.
Right.
And but just by the way, I'm in massive celebration of you for your bravery. Like I know you have a family, right? So for me, it was like a little easier because I'm just
Yes. Yes.
me.
Yes. Yes.
So that's bravery. That's courage.
More gray hairs and a lot more stress, but it took a while. It's a process, right? It took a while to like, you got to go through like grieving and like dealing with certain things and then figuring out, okay, what's the goal? And I'm very much a goal-oriented person, right? And for me, you brought this up, right? Like when it comes to any decision, at the end of the day, you have to understand whether it's food, right? If it's food, you're like, how if I eat this food, how is it going to make me feel, right? If you think that far along, you'll make a better decision. But all too often, we'll just eat whatever is in front of us that looks the best, not understanding, okay, what is it going to do to my body? What is it going to do my well-being, right? So same thing when it comes to career, right? If we're making a career decision, we have to understand the implications. Does it align with our future goals? Does it align with our vision for ourselves? And then make that decision with more information and a little bit more of a clarity as far as what's going to happen. So I think that's really like I would say, planning is a very important part of making decisions. If for instance, if when we talk about food constantly, like if we have a meal plan, right? If you had a meal plan, you would always eat healthy, right? Because you already planned it out. Like you've made a decision when you're in the right state of mind. When we're extremely hungry, we will make a poor decision. And the longer we take to make that decision, the more hungry we may get and the poorer decision we tend to make. So it's like, we get to that analysis paralysis, and I talk about food because that's what I could relate to the most. Uh,
You're gonna have the best lunch ever today.
yes, yeah, you might have to decide what I eat for lunch because I'm getting, I'm getting too hungry to make a decision.
Well, no, but that's actually a really good point. I think we had talked about this. Is like, because we keep talking about intuition and the body, and the intuition residing in the body. And so I think that is a huge piece too when we're making decisions, is to make sure we're in the right frame of mind.
Right.
Like, I know if I have not slept well, it's not going to be the best day for everyone, and to
Yeah.
and to not make any big decisions. Or and so to me it's been a big shift, actually, because my lifestyle, I lived in New York City for most of my adult life. It was very work hard, play hard. Like I mentioned, martinis, that's the norm. Like, let's go. But it's like really keeping my body not clean. I don't want to sound like I'm like, my body is a temple, but like I live, like I'm telling you about my mole and my tortillas that I'm having but it's honoring my body, keeping my body in a really good place, and physical movement every day and getting good sleep. So I am in that frame of mind to make decisions as they arise. And I think actually this is just a clicking moment for me, light bulb moment, maybe part of why I was stuck in so much analysis paralysis when I was in New York City in the 9 to 5, is my body didn't feel good a lot of the time because I was not sleeping. I was drinking too much. I was just like not honoring myself. And so I think when you feel like, it can be really difficult you have that brain fog and you feel anxious, and it can just make everything seem so much worse, and it quiets that voice, that knowing. So I think taking care of your body and whatever that means to you uniquely is really important.
And ultimately you weren't happy, right? So
I was miserable, but I pretended I was happy.
Right. So you weren't truly happy, and the decision that you made helped you get to a point where you're like actually happy.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it was, I'm sure it was stressful to get to this point, and it took work. It's not easy.
No, it has been really difficult. And my ego did not like that we gave up, the title and this, that the boxes, right? But
Stability.
but it was like I was safe and suffering.
Yeah.
And I was blessed to be in a place where I wasn't responsible for other human lives. Like I don't have any children. So, we all have different risk tolerances. I always say that as well when it comes to making big decisions. And I think that's a big part of it too, is getting to know your risk tolerance. And if you're looking after a family, that might look very different than my risk tolerance. And like some people, like I'm going to bring this back to leaving the 9 to 5, but some people fling themselves off the cliff, and they're like, let's fucking go, let's figure it out. And that's their risk tolerance. They can actually, like, their body, their nervous system can hold that. But some people, it needs to be slower, and there's no shame in that game. There's no shame in like gradually building your business on the side, right, while you're in the 9 to 5 or whatever it is. Like, it's just getting to know your system. And like, because you don't want to, when you're making big bold decisions, you don't want to completely blow out your nervous system and you overwhelm yourself. Like, you want to feel a certain level of safety, but at the same time, like fortune favors the bold, and then the universe, like I'm a big believer in that, rewards like big decisive decisions, but that does not mean being reckless by any means.
Right. Not making rash decisions, making educated decisions, making sure you have the appropriate amount of time, but not to string it along longer than it needs to be. You just need to just jump.
Yeah. And I think it's like, when, like you said earlier, it took, I think you said, many months to make that decision. And maybe, I don't know the situation, maybe that was the exact perfect amount of time. Like, but it's like just being honest with ourselves. It's like, why am I waiting? Do I really need more time? What is more time going to give me? How is that going to give me further clarity? What exactly am I waiting for with more time? Or what is the information I still need to collect? And is there a cost to me delaying that decision?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've learned a lot today. You've taught me a lot today.
You've taught me a lot. I love this conversation so much.
I love it because it does impact me a lot. And I'm currently in the process of making some decisions that are taking me longer than it needs to be. And so I think this is helping me like kind of get over that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. You've taught me that. One thing that I ask all my guests, and it doesn't have to be analysis paralysis. I know you have a lot to teach a lot of people, but what is one thing that you want to teach the world?
Oh, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. That famous Carl Jung quote, it always sends shivers down my spine and has been the if I could title this chapter of my life the past 3.5 years, that would be the title of the chapter. Because like my number one value is freedom, and understanding that I was living so unconsciously and I thought I was in control, but it was so much of my unconscious, subconscious programming that was calling the shots. And so bringing light to that and shining light on what was used to be in the shadows to me has been, I mean, it hasn't been pretty to face some of this stuff, right? But to me, it's been the true freedom.
Yeah. I think being aware, right? Like being aware of our emotions is the first step. And we have so many tools in front of us to be able to achieve that, to get the clarity, to make the right
Yeah.
decisions and to do the right things that are better and help improve our lives. So
Yeah, no, they always say like awareness is the first step to any change. And we live, we talked earlier about the overwhelm of information, but it's also just the most beautiful time to be alive in terms of the access we have to the most incredible teachers, the wisdom, the knowledge, the
yeah.
tools that are available for free.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's amazing. Like
Just
I contemplate that on a daily basis. I'm like, well, I'm just so lucky I have access to this.
yeah. Just just uh just for the fact that we're able to communicate here, you're in another country and
Yeah.
we're able to connect and have this, relate to each other. Like you have, I mean, I lived in New York for a few years. We've had a lot of similar experiences in life. So, it's great that we were able to connect from so far away.
But we never would have met if it hadn't
Never.
been for Instagram. So I complain about Instagram all the time, but I'm also so grateful for it because
Yeah.
I get to meet amazing humans like you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we talked about this, right? Like the people we learn inspire us, and learning from other people's experience really help us like grow. And whether it's meeting somebody on Instagram or listening to their podcast or reading their book, they can change our lives. Is there a book that calls out at you at this point that might have like changed your life or changed the trajectory of your life that helped you be who you are?
Oh,
Is there one that stood out?
oh, there's so many, but a book that I really, really loved was, have you heard of The Untethered Soul
Mm-mm.
by Michael Singer?
No.
It just such a beautiful book, it's like poetry, but it also just like stabs you in the heart in the best possible way, like each page. And it's just about like letting life move through you and letting life happen and getting into that kind of cosmic dance of life that we talked about earlier. And it's my sister actually just bought a copy and is reading it. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to grab it because I am like overdue for a reread of that book. It is, yeah, just some of those books where you really contemplate the great
Yeah.
mystery of this existence, but like in a really like practical way too. Like my conscious mind really liked that book as well.
And it's very relevant to our topic, right? Just
Yeah.
let things happen as they should and believe in destiny
Yeah.
and faith and
Yeah. It's like
listen to your
let
intuition.
life move through you, and like those kind of like energy blockages we get like with each thing we take on that we're like, this is terrible, let me obsess about this, or this
Right.
happened to me, let me fly into my victimhood, and that weighs us down more and more and more. And this book to me, again, my value of freedom, like to me this book really teaches you about emotional and energetic freedom.
Yeah. Fantastic. So I know you're pretty active on Instagram. How do people
To say
follow
the
you?
least. You can come say hi, follow me on Instagram, shoot me a DM. I would love to connect with you. It's Emily Oriana Todd.
All right. And we'll flash that in detail show notes. So grab that. Um, I have to go figure out what to have for lunch now.
Ah, I'm
So,
so excited to hear what you decide and how long
but,
it takes you.
but I had so much fun. Time just flew.
I
I
know.
really enjoyed the conversation, and just like that sliding door, I'm sure that this will like change the trajectory of my life.
Ah, Oh, let's contemplate that. Yes. What's gonna happen because of this conversation? That butterfly effect.
Butterfly Effect. That's right. That's another movie I need to watch again.
Oh, yes. Let's make that part of our movie, our movie night this weekend. Game on.
Game on. Game on. All right, Emily, thank you so much for your time. This was fun.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I loved this conversation so, so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely agree. And I want to remind everybody, like, follow, share, help us spread the word. Take care, Emily.
You too.